Hey, this is Ask the Pastor. I'm Pastor Ryan Gaffney, and I field questions on the internet to help people engage during this time that we are separate in the flesh. Aubrey Ashby asked an important question. She says, can one be feminist and Christian? This is a question that my chastity veils and hookup culture class pondered. Many people believe that the two are to coexist and that there has to be some kind of negotiation between the two, but this creates a paradox in which you never really are any if you are part of one and part of the other. What are your thoughts? Great question, Aubrey. In short, yes, I think you can be a feminist and be a Christian. In fact, I think you need to be. Jesus was a feminist. And so if you're trying to be a misogynist and be a Christian, then you're really, that's where you get a paradox, right? You can't be really one or really the other. So you don't want to be a misogynist and a Christian. You want to be a feminist and a Christian. Of course, related to this question and this discussion is, what does it mean to be a feminist? And there is a misconception in conservative circles that what feminists want is superiority and power to be centralized among women and the development of a matriarchal hegemony, which isn't true. If there is someone out there who believes that, they're not a real feminist or a real Scotsman, because that's just feminism is about dismantling the patriarchal hegemony, right? Which is this unbalance that the world has gotten to, that has resulted from men, especially white men, being in charge of flipping everything and making everything about power and conflict and war and violence and struggle. And it hurts everyone. It doesn't just hurt women. It hurts men too. That's the whole idea of toxic masculinity. A lot of people are upset about that term, toxic masculinity, but the claim is not that masculinity is toxic. Toxic masculinity is toxic. And so men who are taught that they have to be big and strong and warriors and they can never cry and they can never suffer and they can never have limits, that is terrible for men. That's not healthy. That's not what Jesus taught. And that needs to be undone. We've got to find some way to remove the patriarchy and replace it with something more compassionate, something more even-handed, something more communal and sharing and loving. And if that sounds like exactly what Jesus was about, that's exactly what Jesus was about. I mean, that is... so often when we talk about Jesus and feminism, we talk about Jesus was nice to women, which yes, Jesus was nice to women. Jesus was nice to everyone. But Jesus was also all about dismantling the empire, the system of Caesar, the system of war and oppression, and lifting up the poor and the marginalized and the weak and the broken and giving them a voice and giving them dignity and respect. That's the message of Christianity, and that's something that feminism is, and there are branches and movements within feminism, but those are the same goals. Now, it is true, of course, that if you're a Christian and you say, hey, I love Jesus, I'm a Christian, there are going to be some people who say, I love feminism, I'm a feminist, and you should stop because the Bible is anti-feminist. The Bible says really problematic things about women, and I disagree with you, and I'm opposed to you. And when I think of Christianity, I think of the Catholic Church and a bunch of men in charge, and that's not what I'm for. And so those struggles are going to happen, where you're going to have people, and the opposite. If you say, hey, I'm a feminist, and I believe that we should be working for a system that's more egalitarian, there are going to be Christians who are like, God says women belong in the home, and feminism is the devil. So yeah, that's going to happen. But the case of dialogue in most situations is that we've got to find a way to dismantle and untangle misunderstandings and ask questions like, what do you mean by that? What exactly is the definition that you're working with? What do you think a feminist is? What do you think I think a feminist is? And get to a place where we can say, all right, so this is really what we're about and what we're working with here. And so, for instance, I don't think that there is any problem with gender norms, with masculine and feminine norms, to say, hey, like, women tend to like flowers a lot more than men do. There are some feminists who don't like me saying that, because if we talk about norms, we're so close to like normalizing those norms and then talking about rigid gender roles and being like, if you're a man, you can't like a flower. Which, yeah, no, we don't want to go there. I don't think the slope is that slippery, and I think it's actually possible. In fact, some great work is being done in queer and trans communities to talk about, like, hey, I've recognized this thing as femininity, and I want that, or I don't want that, and I want this, but to play in those spaces where even there can be, I see room within feminism and within feminist Christianity for something like complementarianism, something like a God prescribed roles for men and for women, and God made men and women different. I think that's a true statement. I'm an egalitarian, but there are some people who say, that there's more prescriptive, God-ordained elements, and I think you can even play in that pool a little bit and keep your feminism if you understand that the things that God made women for include things that we need in the world right now to undo the brokenness that we have, and that men have taken from the things that God made women for and used them and broken them and done man things to them, and we need to pay a lot of attention to the voices over here. That's a little to the right of me, but that's a place that I think you need to be if you're on the complementarian side at all. I'm sorry if that was too cerebral. If you've never heard the words complementarianism and egalitarianism, hey, you're on the internet. Do a Google search. Go down a Wikipedia rabbit hole. You can spend a couple hours there. Have a good time with that. Hey, since we've got time, we've got all the time in the world. I can keep talking for as long as I want. I want to say something else about feminism and theology, which is there's this thing called feminist theology, and it's super, super like good and important, and you should be a part of it. Watch this. Let's play a game in your head right now. Close your eyes and name 10 theologians. Name 10 people you've heard of that are theologians. Go ahead. 1, 2, 3. Can you do 4? Do 4. Come on, think about 5, 6, 7, 8. Do your best. 9. If you got, okay. How many of them are non-white women? If you listed more than 0, like maybe you only listed 7 theologians total if you got the really famous ones in there and you thought of that. I know that you didn't have a lot of time, but if you listed any non-white women in that list, if you can get to 10, even if you've been to seminary, most people are going to name 9 white men and then like 1 black man, maybe a Martin Luther King, right, or a James Cone, or maybe 1 white woman, maybe a Beth Moore. But it is so hard for us as theologians to not be just dominated, just a waterfall poured over top of all of our theological thinking by 1,000 white men. And I'm a white man. I'm not opposed to all white men on principle, but white men do things in a white manny way, and they have white manny thoughts. And if you listen to nobody but white men, especially if you're not a white man, that is going to off-balance your thinking. And so there is this community of theologians who are saying what we need to do is pay very, very close attention to those elements of the scriptures that the men are not paying attention to. And so we need to ask questions about Mary and Mary's song, the Magnificat. And we need to pay close attention to Sarah and like what would Sarah say about her experiences with Abraham? And we need to ask about the role of women from a woman's perspective, and the voices that if all of the gospel writers are men, what would it sound like if one of them was a woman, and like play in that stream. And it is so important that if you're at the I listen to nobody but white men and that's all I need to, that's unfortunately that's a system most of us are trapped in. The let's pay attention to some women is actually really moderate. That's like middle of the road for like, hey, can we progress anything at all? That's your middle ground position, and then you can go way more to the progressive side from there. You can do a lot of mujerista theology, womanist theology, queer theology, and ask about all these voices that are silenced in all of these different post-colonial contexts. But when we do theology, we want to do that together. And when we do that together, we want to get multiple voices, and it would help us the most if those multiple voices were like different from ours, if they had different experiences. And so again, like theology without any feminism, like you're talking about radical right-wing stuff. At that point, you're off the deep end of traditionalistic, regressive, reactionary. You gotta get like at least to the middle of like, hey, let's talk about what some people of color think. Let's talk about what some women think. Sometimes that's not like a radical revisionist liberal thing to do. That's a Christian, really basic thing to do. And so. Yes, be a feminist and a Christian. Don't be a misogynist and a Christian. Thank you for the question. It was a wonderful question. If this was a good answer, if you got what you wanted, I would love to encourage you to share this. If it wasn't a good answer, I would love for you to respond and tell me that wasn't really what I meant. I was looking for something else. Like, let's talk about it. Let's build a community. And if any of the rest of you out there are watching me talk about this stuff and have more questions, send them. I would love to answer those questions too. And there are some other answers to other questions up and around here. Thank you all. See you next time.